Coach Kristin. So go ahead,
Awesome.
Take it away, Kristin.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited to get started. Thank you all for joining today. Just to get started here, many of you likely already know we're Amala Vida, and we are a career leadership, life, and health coaching company, and we're here to really support you in building a healthy lifestyle and finding a career you love. So our team of coaches supports clients in all of these areas and really building a lifestyle that's fulfilling and that they love. And I am a life and career coach here at Amala Vida. I also work remotely and have been living abroad for the past 3 years. 2 years ago in Argentina and then recently in Mexico. And I'm actually back in the Bay Area for a visit. So kind of spending a lot of time with family and getting some time back in the US. But I really just love supporting my clients in both areas of lifestyle and career. And one area very dear to me that I love to support is the topic of today, which is boundaries. And boundaries are so fundamental to supporting ourselves and really protecting our needs. And I just want to share with all of you on a personal level, this is something that I'm constantly working on. And whether it be with career or personal life, this can be an area that takes constant patience and practice. So for any of you struggling or any of you new to this area, any of you who have the ups and downs that it can bring, I just want you to know that you're not alone and that I experience this, my clients experience this, and that it just takes practice. And today I'm excited to share a lot of guidance for you to support you in going through kind of this challenge of setting boundaries and getting them to really stick, but just to mention that they can be extremely life-changing and that while it might be challenging getting them into place and getting them to really stick there, the ripple effects that happen once you set boundaries are seriously so positive and empowering, and they can really impact your life in so many positive ways. So to keeping on and kind of really getting these into place and practicing, really enforcing them, because they will really support you and protect you and your needs. So here's kind of an overview of what we'll be going through today. So just really defining what these are and going into why they're important, the very, very important area of how to create them. And as with many areas, communication is key. And then we'll go through some challenges you may face and some tips that will support you in really getting these to stick. So just to start off, we're going to go into what is a boundary. And I want to mention that today's webinar, I really want to be interactive. I want us to share with each other, and this is a safe space. So just to get started, I want to encourage you. I'm going to open up the conversation at times in the presentation for people to share. So I want to encourage you when I do that to feel free to unmute yourself and share any. It'll be different topics as we go, but just to get started off, I want to hear what you all define as a boundary. So if you feel comfortable, please go ahead and unmute and kind of share with me your definition of a boundary. Any takers?
Hi, Kristin.
Hi, Alyssa.
Hi. I think a boundary is putting like an unapologetic limit on maybe like what energy you're willing to share.
Awesome. I love that.
Thanks.
Yes, a limit. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Yeah, putting I love the unapologetic limit there. Anyone else want to share how they define?
I'm thinking about this, so it's probably going to come out all rambled, but I think it's something that's predefined too, that boundary. So when that instance happens or whatever it is, you can very quickly just sort through it and be like, yes or no, yes or no. So a boundary would be something that predefined limit. So to add a little bit on what Alyssa said.
Love that. So not just a limit, but predefined. And I think that, and we'll get into this more later, but is a quality of a strong boundary is it's clearly defined. Awesome. Anyone else?
I think of boundaries of there's going to be those firm ones that are very rigid, but there also can be kind of porous boundaries as well.
Yes, they can definitely vary, right? Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing some definitions. Just to go into more detail. So a boundary can take, I mean, we just shared 3 different definitions, right? And it can really vary person to person what your definition of a boundary is, but ultimately this is a guideline or a limit or a rule, and it's meant to protect you. So boundaries are meant for protection, and they're to protect and honor a need of your own. And these can take the form of physical, we can all relate right now in COVID times. We got that 6 feet boundary and the physical, so many physical boundaries given the times. But it also can just be like knowing kind of your personal space in the terms of physical. It can also be mental. It can be emotional, and emotional can look like protecting your time or your space. But overall, it's meant for protection, and it's meant to protect and honor a need of yours, which is why this can really vary person to person, because we all have different needs and we all have different areas that are important to us. And so creating these boundaries are to protect that. And that makes us feel good, right? Because we're protecting something important to us and a need of our own. So why are boundaries important? And we just started to go into this a bit, but having strong boundaries can have so many positive ripple effects. So boundaries support having a strong identity. They support you in having greater self-confidence. It's an act of self-respect. It can improve your self-esteem. Boundaries can also improve your overall general health and well-being, because ultimately, again, you're protecting something important to you and you're honoring your own needs. So this is protecting that. This rule or limit is protecting that area for you. So just to kind of illustrate this, I'm going to give an example of a lack of boundaries versus having boundaries. So we're all in COVID, and things are hopefully improving for many, since it's been a year or so that we've been in this situation. But many of you likely transitioned to working from home instead of in office. And just to give a hypothetical example, many people who used to work in an office knew their hours, 9 to 5, and maybe transitioning back into or transitioning to the home. Let's just give an example of someone who is now working, instead of ending their day at 5, working into late hours of the night, because there's always work for them to do. They're kind of wrapping up and going to bed and then getting back on in the morning, not really having that time for themselves to exercise or spend time with family. This person who is literally working away, maybe feeling stressed, they might be feeling depleted, maybe a bit resentful towards their employer because they're not getting that time for themselves. They might feel a bit powerless. And maybe they don't have any boundaries in place, just assessing the situation. What if they just instead made a rule or a limit that, just like when they were in an office, knowing their obligation was 9 to 5, they would log off at 5 p.m. and not answer any non-urgent requests and create that space for their evening time for themselves and for their families. Just having that one boundary or limit in place could make a huge difference for this person. They would have this entire evening now to themselves, to rest, to work out, to spend time with their loved ones. And this person, with just having this one boundary, which easier said than done, I know it takes some self-control and there's tactics there, but they'd feel greater happiness. They'd likely feel a lot more calm and less stressed, energized, self-respect, because they're honoring their needs, and empowered, because just putting one boundary in place and feeling those positive effects in that general well-being can be extremely empowering. So for those of you who maybe are newer to setting boundaries, just know, one tip I have is to definitely start small, because again, it's really important that you can honor this. But how just noticing when you set one boundary and put it into place, how empowering that can feel. And that will often encourage you to put more and more boundaries into place. So starting small ripples into creating more, and positive effects follow and general well-being. So this is just one example to illustrate how having a boundary in place can really influence you and impact your well-being. So now the question is how to create boundaries. You likely now know some examples of what they are and why they're important, but just how to put these in place and where to start. So I have a 3-step formula to share with you to support you in creating boundaries. So the first step is just to reflect on what's important to you. So in that previous example, having that evening time to themselves or with their family, having just that work-life balance was important, right? It could be getting enough rest. It could be having time for your morning routine. Just think about what's important to you. Then the second step is to write out a non-negotiable. So taking that example of morning routine being important, maybe my morning routine is very important to me and my non-negotiable is that I need an hour each morning for my morning routine. So that would be a non-negotiable. And then the third step would be determining what limit, rule, or guideline is needed to support and protect that non-negotiable. So say the non-negotiable is morning routine and needing that hour. A limit or rule to protect that could be, I am not going to touch my phone, my emails, nothing until I have that 1 hour for my morning routine. So if it supports also, you can be even more, the clearer you can get in this limit, rule, or boundary, the better. So it could be, I will not check emails or check my phone until like 8:30 a.m. So you get up early and you have your time for your morning routine. Another example could be, maybe you're someone who really needs time to themselves. And it's like, I need one night of the week completely for alone time to myself. So that might be your non-negotiable. So what rule or limit could you put in place to support that? Is maybe I will not make plans with anyone at least one night of the week so I can have my designated alone time that is so needed. So here are just 2 examples of how you can go about using this formula, but this can really support in kind of getting that boundary into place. And don't worry, we'll get to getting to try this out on our own. But before that, I want you all to take just a minute to do some self-reflection because, again, we're all unique and we all have our own needs. I was just sharing some examples, but take some time to self-reflect in what is important to you. So again, going back to some examples, maybe that's morning routine, maybe it's your sleep schedule, maybe it's time with family, maybe it's work-life balance. There can be so many different examples here. So just reflect on what is important to you. Now, reflect on what specific areas in your life that you need to set boundaries. So maybe think on if there's some areas in your life right now that you may be feeling a little resentful or maybe a little depleted, maybe a little drained, some areas you might be struggling with. So think about areas that you might benefit from setting some boundaries and maybe thinking back to that example earlier where the work-life balance was a struggle and how putting that boundary into place allowed them to have that evening to themselves. So think about areas where you need to set boundaries. And then finally, think about what rules or limits you need to put in place to protect that. So again, whether that's having that 1 hour for a morning routine and not checking your phone or checking notifications until a certain time, or making sure you don't touch your phone until you have that 1 hour for your morning routine. But think about what rules or limits, and again, as specific as you can, that you could put in place to support. So take a second to reflect on these and again, know yourself because we're all unique and we all have different needs and different areas that boundaries can support. And now we all can give this a try. So I want to open it up for everyone to try out this exercise. So if you have a pen and a pencil, or if you have, maybe you're on your computer, you can type this out. But I want you to go through that same exercise we just discussed on your own and actually write down 1 to 3 of your own non-negotiables. So these are things like needing an hour for your morning routine, needing to get to bed early. What's really important to you that you need in your day and in your life? Now, for each non-negotiable you write, I want you to also write out that limit or rule you want to put in place to support that. So that is your boundary. So what specific, clear limit or rule do you need to put in place to support this non-negotiable? And as you write these limit or rules, I want you to ask yourself 3 questions, and I'll write them in the chat to help. So I want you to ask yourself, is it realistic? Is it clear to you? And can you honor it? I'm pasting these in the chat so you can all. So as you have your list, think to yourself, is it realistic? Is it clear to you? And can you honor it? Because one thing about boundaries is they all start with us. We communicate to others how to honor them. So it's very, very important that it's crystal clear to you, that it feels realistic, and that you feel you can honor it, because you honor it first and that ripples out to how others honor it. So if it's not answering yes to these questions, maybe it's just a little tweaking or modifying it or breaking it down to something that is clear, realistic, that you can honor to get started. Because again, we can start small and we can build, but the key is to start. We've got to take action and commit. So making sure we can honor it is super important. So just knowing yourself and knowing what feels realistic to you, where you are at now to get started. And again, the empowering effects you can feel by these getting put into action will motivate you to have these grow. So again, I want to open this up, and I would love if whoever feels comfortable to please share kind of maybe 1 or 2 of the boundaries you came up with. And by putting it out there, that's another way of helping us commit, right? When we write things down or when we speak about them, that helps us to kind of put it out there into the universe and get ready to honor it. So you also can inspire others by what you share that may discover something that can support them. So I would love with whoever is willing to kind of speak up and share what you've come to using this formula here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vaughn Shea. I'll give you one of mine. It's actually daily since I've been working from home, and my company, we are indefinite. And my one non-negotiable is going to the park to run and walk every day for an hour. My boundary is to be electronics free. So I don't take my phone. I have my my watch for for the timing and my heart rate, etc. But it's just me, my music, and the wind with, and it's certainly obtainable. I've told my coworkers about it, and it's so cathartic. It just makes me feel really, really good. So it's realistic. I'm extremely clear on what I need to be a better worker. And yeah, I honor it every day, Monday through Friday. That is my routine.
That is awesome. And you're honoring it, and you said it's clear and realistic and it makes you feel great. That's so awesome. And thank you for sharing. And it sounds like you're doing awesome that you're putting that into action and you're feeling it's making you feel great. And especially, I know all of us are facing this work from home challenge, just having that fresh air and getting outside and keeping that up is just I'm sure makes all the difference in your day.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else have one they want to share?
I'll share.
Awesome.
So I actually just quit my job. I was the manager at Planet Fitness down in New Orleans for the past year. And I actually got COVID, and my supervisors were sort of like just all over like the text thread, like, when are you coming back? Like, what's going on? And like, talk about boundaries. I was just like, wow, like there's no respect for like the fact that I'm actually sick with a headache. And I was one of those people who thought like, I'm not going to get this illness, just going to work, like hammer to the, whatever the phrase is. And lo and behold, it got me. I was like bedridden for 9 days, and my supervisors were like, well, other people were able to come back in 2 weeks. And it just kind of like hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, these people don't care if I die. I was like, okay, like ultimate reset button. I was like, if I don't stand up for myself and just like submit this resignation, like, sure, it's a salary. I was like, but I love cleaning houses. I love childcare. Like, I will survive, and I have to like set this reset button. So when I saw this webinar, I was like, oh my God, this is so like literally what I just went through, because there's a lot of, I think, like gaslighting, just like in the basic, oh, good for you, Alyssa. Like gaslighting, just like in the corporate world of like, you have to uphold this 9 to 5 like 9 to 7 hour breaks and just all these new programs. I was like, this job is just not like, this job cannot fit into my values set any longer. Needless to say, these past like 6 days of post resignation have been like the happiest days of my life. And I'm just like getting nonstop like childcare opportunities and just communicating with mothers. And I've just been like over the moon. So I said, time for gardening, time for walking alone with my dog so I don't self-abandon again. And just turning off the phone, like it was really wild. Like even other managers were like, well, you really should be taking long walks if COVID went to your lungs. And like, it just I was like, oh my God, like there's just no respect. So I don't want to overtalk, but I feel like what I just went through is like so pertinent to just like what this is about. I was like, these people are gonna take my life, like back to work. I was like, you guys, this is nuts.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing. And wow, like, I'm so sorry you dealt with that, but how amazing and empowering that you honored yourself and honored your needs and made that decision. Because I mean, and it's great to hear you're feeling better, first from COVID, number one, and from that experience. And yet you will figure it out. And I'm sure you'll look back on it, and I know we've exchanged a message, but as a blessing, and just honoring yourself and putting yourself first, especially knowing, given the times, what we're all, the challenge we're all going through, given this situation that's changed all of our lives, and really honoring yourself and your needs. So that is an amazing example of putting a boundary in place. And thank you for sharing and being so
You're
open
welcome.
about it.
Thank you, Kristin.
And good for you. And like, honestly, like that's something to like really acknowledge yourself for too.
Yes, because I went back and forth. I was like, am I really going to resign from like a salary job? And then I was just like, the job had taken away. And I feel like so many people can relate. Like a lot of corporate jobs, they do sort of strip you of your identity just so you fit their mold, which ultimately is just all about money at the end of the day. So it's just like, yeah, if we don't, I feel like, sign on to webinars like this, then like we can like a lot of corporate jobs can really like end up stripping us of our identity.
Yeah, and I think, and this might be a little off topic, but I'm just gonna, and it's right. It's important to stay in our identity, right? No matter what role we're in, is to continue to know that we are a person and our work is part of us, but that we are not all, our work is not all of us, right? And that we are an identity outside of that. And it is important, though, also something that you just mentioned, and this is what we support here, is also values alignment in our work, like feeling that we are in alignment with how our work is handling situations and how they're treating us as individuals, given we're dealing with many challenges right now, whether it's like emotional or physical, like making sure, and that's again with these clear boundaries, making sure that our work supports our boundaries, right? Knowing our obligations, and this is something I'll get a bit into, is like knowing our work obligations and then creating boundaries that are, knowing your responsibilities are around that. And when those get violated, we have to determine, how do we want to move forward from this? And in your case, I completely hear you. That was a decision to leave the company. But that's a decision we make when our boundary gets violated, right? To know how we want to move forward. And the challenges we'll get into more around how to handle those challenges that might come up when a boundary violation happens. But thank you again for sharing. It's very inspiring. And I'm sure I can see that others on the chat are relating to what you shared. So thank you again for opening up to everyone and attending and being here today. And I hope this exercise was helpful for you all, and you can continue to use it as you set boundaries in all areas of life, whether it be career, whether it be personal or relationships. But this is just a formula to support you in kind of trying to get those written out. And what I'll get into now is about communication, because writing these out is a form of communicating your boundaries with yourself. And like I mentioned already, and you'll probably hear me mention other more times throughout this presentation, is that communication with yourself is key with boundaries. Because if you're not crystal clear on what these are, if you're wishy-washy, then your execution likely will follow. So the key is to be crystal clear with yourself on what these boundaries are. And one way that can support you is writing these out, like we just did. You all got one step done today, and you've written some of these out. So writing these out is a great step to doing that. And you can even, if you want to make this a fun journaling activity, create different categories like relationships with friends, relationships, romantic relationships, career, and write these out in each of those areas using that formula I shared as a guide. You even might have a specific category for a specific person that you need to set very clear boundaries with. Like, it's all based on what feels good and is important for you. But writing these out creates a form of a written contract with yourself. So it's like a written commitment. And if you want to sign it to really commit, even better. But this is a way of communicating to yourself and committing that you will honor these. And kind of, I'm all about writing it down and living it out. So putting it out there through writing, putting it out there through speaking, this is how you really commit yourself to these boundaries. So communicate with those involved. If you feel comfortable, and you could communicate with friends and family members, sharing your boundaries list, maybe colleagues too, for accountability. But I want to emphasize that there's verbal communication that can help to communicate boundaries. There's written communication and writing these out, but also there's just action, right? Because by putting this into action and setting a boundary, you're communicating it. And those that respect you and love you should honor it, whether it's written, verbal, or just through saying no. So you'll find that communicating these, whatever method works best for you, is empowering, because you are honoring yourself, you're honoring your needs. It's an area you're putting yourself first, and it's an act of self-care. So just general communication, whatever method works best for you, is really empowering. And one other example I want to share is going back to career and work from home, because this is the times, right? I mean, I work remotely by choice, but many of us are not doing it by choice. And many of you may be struggling with that. And if you have a close colleague or you're close to your manager and you really struggle to log off, maybe writing this out and sharing it with someone on your team. Yes, Jessica, in the chat right now, to keep you accountable, that can support you. So just telling a close team member, like, hey, I really need to start logging off and actually having dinner with my family or going out with a friend. Can you and then maybe they send you a ping like, why are you still online? But something to support you because you've now communicated with them something that you really want to put into action. So not being afraid to communicate these boundaries and ask for support, because the people you love and the people close to you will support you and know that this is honoring a need of yours. And I'm seeing in the chat now, I heard an idea about putting your working hours or lunch break into your email signature. Oh, wow. No, I like that too. Yeah, whatever it takes. And there's creative ways, like I'm loving what's being shared, ways to go about this, just so that it's known so people can support you. Because if you're not communicating something, others may not know to honor it. So making sure you're communicating in whatever way feels and works well for you. So now to get into the potential challenges, because easier said than done, right? It's like a 3-step formula does not just lead to everything running perfectly, unfortunately, but it can run well. And that's kind of by knowing your challenges and working on practice, patience, and self-compassion. So be kind to yourself, even when you're facing these challenges, because again, boundaries take work, but they have so many positive ripple effects like we talked about. So for all of my fellow people pleasers out there, I like to call myself a recovering people pleaser. Many of us may be in the same boat and have the struggle with saying no. So practice saying no and practice saying no without giving a reason. Because if it's not within, say it's not like a work situation within your work responsibilities, I mean, you have the power to decide what you do and what you do not want to do. So you can say no. So practice saying no when you can't commit to something. And in line with that, you don't need to over explain. We often, when we get started with boundaries, feel like we have to explain why we're saying no. There's no need to over explain. Again, going back to, you can decide what you do and what you don't want to do. And that does not require an explanation. I know that the guilt factor can come in, and sometimes we'll feel guilty if it's a loved one or a close friend. But this practice of just giving a statement can support you and not over explaining. And that is really a sign of strong boundaries. It's just like, no, I can't make that today. No explanation needed. But when it comes to close loved ones and friends, and when you're starting to set new boundaries, one thing you may come across is number 4, others making it about them. And this can look like some examples. You never want to come out with me anymore. You never spend time with me anymore. You're always busy. And for others, they might be sad they're losing some of your time. You may be kind of honoring yourself more and taking this time for yourself, and they may be noticing that. And the key here, and my advice, is to use I statements so they realize that it isn't about them, and say things like, I need a night to myself. I need this time for self-care. I've been feeling so out. I need this weekend just to spend alone. Just by using those I need or I statements, this can support with others making it, when others may be triggering the guilt factor and making it a bit about them. It's just coming back to why you're doing this is about you. It's about your needs. It's about honoring yourself. So that can kind of support there, but I hear all of you who may struggle with that. I have been there too. And these I need statements can really support, and just making sure your loved ones know you love them, but that this is something to honor yourself. And then finally, I encourage you all to come up with a response plan, because what can happen as you're setting boundaries is there may be others who consistently will not respect or honor those. And again, this is something to protect you. This is to honor your needs. And when someone continuously violates that, it does not feel good. And this is a time where all of our response plans will look different, but we all need to have that ready to know, okay, what will I do if someone continuously violates this very important boundary of mine? And this is a moment where we need to determine, maybe this requires distancing from this person. Maybe this requires leaving a role. Maybe this requires changing or leaving a relationship. But this is something that is individual to all of us and something to reflect on as you're creating that list, to know how you want to handle those situations, because these are ultimately to protect you. But again, those I statements can really help there. And just all practicing this, knowing what might come up. And again, one thing is, I think it's all through action and experience. So you'll learn as you go as well how to navigate these situations. But these are just some of the potential challenges that you might face. So to go in some tips to support you, knowing those challenges, and coming back to what we've kind of talked about throughout today, is one tip is just being clear. And again, I said I would come back to this multiple times, so we're back again. But it's being super clear on your boundaries with yourself first, because how you honor this dictates how others honor it. And it all starts with you. It all starts with you. So be very clear, whatever this takes, writing it down, putting it on a paper when you get up every morning to read. So whatever it takes, be extra clear with yourself on what this boundary is. If you're newer to this area, starting small and making sure it answers those 3 questions we talked about earlier. Is this realistic? Is it clear to you? And can you honor it? So if you're new to boundaries, making a list of like 20 probably is going to be a challenging starting point. Maybe starting with a few and then building, because again, as you put these into action, you'll feel empowered to continue to build off of them. Now, one really important thing I want to mention is to acknowledge yourself in your progress. Like, really take in when you say no to something and feel so empowered when you're maybe have been a people pleaser and say yes to everything, and now are saying no to something you just really don't want to do, and you're instead taking that space to yourself. Like, acknowledge the win of and the progress of being able to say no without explaining, or being able to turn down a plan to really honor yourself and take time for yourself. So really acknowledge your wins and your progress as you're working on these boundaries. But also, we all may regress, and I will say they are challenging. And so at times we may give in and cave on a boundary, and we may catch ourselves and get disappointed. But I want you in those moments to really work to be compassionate and kind to yourself, and remind yourself that boundaries are challenging and that you are learning. And just give yourself a moment and not be too hard on yourself, because these take practice, and know that the next time you want to do differently. But that awareness and just knowing that you allowed someone to violate a boundary, or that you didn't exert that boundary, that awareness there is a huge step. So just be kind to yourself and compassionate, knowing that these take practice and they take time, and continue to practice. And in those moments you feel like you may have allowed someone to violate that, know that next time you don't want that to happen and you will do differently. Also, we are all constantly changing and evolving. Our situations are evolving. We change jobs, we change locations, our relationships change. So allow these to shift and be redefined as your life shifts and is redefined. And so don't feel too glued to your list. But when you do feel that you need to make a change, let's go back to number 1 and be extremely clear on what you're changing this boundary to. So be extra clear on what the change is and why you're making it before you put that into action. So while they may shift and be redefined, we don't want to find that we're being like loose on these, because we've got to enforce them to have others honor them, right? So just if you do as they shift and redefine, make sure you're clear on what is shifting and why. And then finally, create a mantra to support. So I'm all about mantras to have as reminders to, and I do this a lot with clients, kind of those post-it reminders or things that are there easily for you to see as a reminder when you're creating change. So one example of a mantra could be, I set boundaries as an act of self-love and protection. And this could be something you could have on your computer or maybe when you wake up every morning, but having this mantra somewhere, when you feel like you might bend on a boundary, having that can help you move into I'm enforcing this mode. So I would love if everyone right now, because I think a mantra should be unique to all of us and what feels good to each person. So if you all want to create your own mantra based on this presentation and based on what can support you to remind you to enforce these boundaries. And then again, I want to open it up. And if you feel comfortable in sharing kind of what mantra you come to please share it with the group, because you'll likely inspire others by having your own unique mantra that they may want to take on as well. So does anyone have a mantra they want to share?
Hi, I'm Jillian. Hey, so I think that mine would be because I've struggled with major depression, mood disorder for 18 years, and something that comes back to me continually is like self-worth. So every time I'm like, I don't deserve this. So I think one would be I set boundaries because I deserve to be happy.
I love that so much.
That would
Yes.
be
And Jillian and I also work together, and you so deserve it.
mine.
And I love that. And just having it somewhere where you easily see it, whether it be a post-it or whatever that is, I think I love that.
I think it's easy to just like drown yourself in misery when you have like mental illness, and in general, you're like, oh, I'm so comfortable with this, you like don't know what to do with happiness sometimes. So yeah.
Yeah. And just, I mean, waking up every day and seeing that as like one of the first things or whatever it is, but just having that reminder, since our mind can play tricks on us. And just sometimes we need something. So I love that. And I see some in the chat here. Oh, I love this. I use boundaries as a suit of armor. That is really, I love that. So creative. Anyone else want to share? Here's another. I set boundaries because if I didn't, I would give everything away. These are great.
How about I set boundaries to encourage others to do the same?
Yes. Oops, sorry. I clicked the slide. Yes, I love that because go back here. Because how we set the tone, right? So by setting boundaries, we often communicate to others how to set boundaries. And one quote I love also is that those who often don't honor your boundaries are those who don't have boundaries of their own. So just by setting your own, you're often communicating to others. It can be empowering and support others, knowing that, okay, this person has strong boundaries in place. That can inspire someone else to want to do the same. So I love that. Anyone else?
Hey, Kristin.
No is a complete
Oh.
sentence.
Oh, yes. Love that.
No is a complete sentence.
That actually is
Yes.
one of the quotes on this next slide here. I love that. And Jill, yes, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I love this and I hate to interrupt, but I do want to leave time. We are at 10 minutes till.
Okay.
I just want to leave time for Q&A. We do have a few questions, but I also want to open that up for other people as well.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll move right to Q&A. I'm just going to pull up these final words of wisdom. One was someone's mantra, which I love, is no is a complete sentence. And yes, that's back to no need to over-explain. No says enough. Like, that's it. No period. And finally, one other I want to share from the chat, or two others. Do something better today for a better tomorrow. Love that. And I set boundaries to be the best version of me. Yes, which ties perfectly into this here, where how showing up for yourself allows you to best show up for others. So being that best version of you really ripples into everyone around you, right? Because being your best self has just all these positive effects that radiates into the people around you. And boundaries are to protect you and to honor you so that you can be that best version. So with that, I want to now open it up for Q&A. And I know Jill said there were already some questions. So we'll move now into some Q&A time.
All right, so I'll get to the one that I that I recently saw. And for everyone else, if you do have any questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. Or if you wanted to ask them, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. But I do want to note, just be conscious of the time and speaking time, just to make sure that we can get through everything. So, all right. So one, this is kind of more of a comment, but I feel it like kind of piggybacking off of Jillian, maybe just mentioning this, but something from Danny is, it's so interesting because I have this urge to help everyone else and not feel like I'm deserving of the support without giving. So it's super hard to receive without always giving. It's kind of like allowing myself to be open to abundance. So I feel like that's kind of like a not really common theme, but I know that this is something that I work on with my clients all the time, is that unworthiness, that feeling of unworthiness or not deserving of time to take care of ourselves. Because it is really challenging, especially just for women in general, because of all of that lineage being passed down of it's selfish to take care of ourselves, that we have to put our families first, we have to put our kids first, we have to do everything first. And then maybe at the end of the day, if we have a few minutes for ourselves, we can take care of ourselves. Well, we know how that turns out. We're burnt out, we're spinning our wheels, we're overexerting, and everyone suffers, including ourselves. And that's unworthiness. Again, that's something that it takes a lot of practice and a lot of healing and a lot of work to get through. But just being aware of that is a really huge step in the right direction, because what we focus on expands. So if we're working through that unworthiness and finding ways to validate ourselves without external validation, is a really great start to that, because prioritizing yourself when you've felt that it was selfish for so long feels weird and it feels uncomfortable. And that can also bring up a lot of stuff. So I think just like being aware of that is so important, and just breaking it down and just being like, back to your mantras and your boundaries. Like, I am doing this for myself because this is what I need to show up as my best self. Yeah. I don't know if you have any other words. I just wanted to bring that up because what Danny said, I feel like it was a common thread too.
Completely agree with everything you shared. It's like a process of unlearning what we felt as what is selfish, when really it's just we deserve that time, and creating reminders to relearn that we do deserve that and that we should honor ourselves, and like putting those into action and noticing how it in effect actually more positively affects the people who are calling it selfish, which is ironic.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing I put in the chat too is like, what's another way that you can, what's a different word you can replace selfish with that is more serving for you? So this is healthy. This is what I need. This is beneficial. This is serving me, anything else,
this is
because that's just,
self-care.
yes.
This is self-love.
Yes. Yeah. So it's just like picking that apart and just challenge those thoughts, those thoughts of selfishness, but of course, all valid. Okay. So another really great question, which again, this could literally be an entire webinar, because this is something that I work on with myself, my clients, I'm sure you do. I really struggle with enforcing boundaries with my parents who have taken advantage of me being a people pleaser my whole life. Any suggestions?
Yes, this is really, really, this is a I mean, a tough one, but I can say that it's starting to, again, starting being clear with yourself and starting small. Maybe it's limiting time with that person. Maybe it's distancing, but like showing your love in other, this could be, it's a really challenging, it can be really challenging, but I think once you start enforcing the boundaries with them, it will be received and they will know, I know someone close to me who actually has gone through this, and the relationship has drastically improved since they started to put strong boundaries in place. And the boundaries are now being very much respected. So I think that it's really challenging when you get started with this, but once you put these into place and you're firm on them, and a support of like this person very dear to me has the support of a therapist to do this. But now that relationship is better than it ever was before, through practice and just being firm. And that was not easy. So I'm not going to say she immediately put that into place, but I think once you work towards that and having support is really useful there. But it can really impact your relationship for the better. And again, you'll feel much better honoring your needs and not draining, because people pleasing can be draining. So protecting your energy and yourself and your needs.
May I provide my insight on that real quickly,
Yeah.
like in the couple seconds, because I know I'm watching the time.
Yeah, definitely.
So what I did, because I have that problem too, you actually said a lot of good advice. What I would add to it as well is a couple things, and it really depends on what your parents will receive as like, oh, okay, I understand my daughter or son, the boundary that they need. I had conversations with them where it was very gentle, but I sometimes don't do it all fully in one conversation. It takes multiple conversations in different aspects. So sometimes my mom will rely on me about her relationship. And, as her daughter, she shouldn't expect me to hear about all her personal relationship information, because that can hurt me, or I'll take all of that anxiety and put it onto myself. And then I'll go to sleep and wake up with it. So the boundary that I had to set there is I brought up like a reading that I found online. I said, hey, mom, can I read this to you? And it's about setting boundaries or who to ask for help. And I read it to her and I asked her, so who's your support system, mom? Who do you talk to when you need help? And she explained to me the three people, me, my mom, and my grandmother, and her best friend. And I said, well, I don't think I can be your full support mom in terms of like talking about your relationships, because as your daughter, I do feel what you feel. And when I started to open up the conversation that way, just by bringing a simple book reading or article, she started to like not comment on it, but more so like, oh, okay, like listen. And she realized like, okay, my daughter has been that person that I've gone to for many, many things for many, many years. And since she's brought up to my attention in the most healthy way, who would be the best person to help me with my concerns and my issues, or I need her to do this or do that, it would probably be my best friend more than my daughter, because my daughter my best friend won't take that stress level on her own shoulders, versus my best friend. It's like the conversation is happening, and when it's done, it's done.
Wow. I mean, that was extremely, I took something, thank you for sharing that. Like, I want to share that actually with this person I was just speaking about. I think that's amazing. And again, one thing that came up there that reminded me is that communication, how important it is to have those, it may be difficult, but conversations, so that you're clear with the other individual in your life about what this boundary is and why you need it. But that was extremely great advice. I hope I really appreciate you sharing that, and I will now be sharing that with my friends. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Danny. That was, I love that. Cause I think it's just trying, even just trying different things, right? Cause you can tell someone over and over again till you're black and blue in the face, but if it's not resonating, kind of finding different ways to do that. And I think just sharing your context of like why this is important. And this is this is for me. It doesn't have to do with you, you know, kind of, because I know that with family, a lot of that gets blurred, and it can be really, really, it can be really complicating. I know that's something that, again, I work on my clients all the time is establishing that, but it's a little bit different when it comes to setting boundaries with friends than it is with setting boundaries with your mom, you know, and stuff like that. But I think it's just like what you've been saying, Kristin, is like that why this is to protect me so that I can continue to show up as the best version. So I love that. All right. So we are at time. I
Yay.
don't think anyone had any other questions. There was some really, really, really good feedback. I actually might even just download the chat and share it in the recap email, because I think that there's just some really, really good stuff here. And I'm getting a very excited head nod from Alyssa and Kristin. So I'm definitely going to include this. No, there was some really, really good stuff here. Oh, there you go. There you go. Awesome. That would be awesome. Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, cool. Go ahead, Kristin.
So just to wrap up, and yes, I've seen this chat is so much valuable insight and resources are being shared within the chat. So we'll be sending out a recap email, but also Jill will be posting a link in the chat that if you need support around boundaries or in general healthy habits to, of course, this is all to honor you and to live your best, to be your best self, live your best life, because honoring ourselves ripples into our whole life, right? And how we feel dictates how we show up for others. So we're here to support. So if you do want to speak or get to know one of our coaches, me or another one of our coaches, we do have a relationship specialist team, and the link in the chat, feel free to click through and book a time. But this was amazing. I really appreciate everyone's participation. I wanted to make it interactive, and it was beyond that. And I learned so much from what everyone shared. And I think it was great that I felt like it was such an open space for everyone, which is what I wanted to create today. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for attending. And I hope that this has supported you no matter where you are in your journey with boundaries and getting these in place. Because again, to wrap it up, this is all about you and to honor you and to protect you. So don't forget that this is for you, and it's not selfish. It is self-love and self-care and self-nurturing. So I hope everyone has a great day, and thank you for joining.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Kristin. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is wonderful.
Thank you guys
Thank
so
you,
much.
everyone.
Hope to see you all again soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.